Alan, nice to have you on. I'm just going to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience so they get to know you better. So, yeah, go for it. I hand
All
over
right.
to
Well,
you.
thank you for having me on. I'm very passionate about B2B marketing and marketing research. Just to give you like a 1 or 2 minute outline of where I've been and how I've got here, I have an MBA in marketing, but I have, more important than that, 45 years of consulting and marketing research working with companies in B2B. And this ranges from the big companies like GE and IBM to small startups. Um, and where I've basically have, I think, over 250 projects. I've stopped counting. I'm getting way too old. Um, in a variety of what I'll call voice of the customer projects, where we
Mm,
where we take what the customers want and then from there design the client strategy. It could be to go to a new market, could be increased share, could be a new product. Um, so the course of my experience, I've seen some things that have worked very well, and I've seen some things that have just tanked. And I'd like to kind of spend more of this discussion on the things I see are wrong in B2B marketing and how we've
mm,
gone astray. I'm going to talk first, I think, what good marketing is, and then
mm.
I'm going to talk some of the bad practices I see. And then you jump in because you've got a different perspective here. But I'm going to go back to Philip Kotler,
Oh,
who is really the modern father of marketing, professor. And I'm going to butcher his definition here, but his definition of marketing is defining your customer segments, delivering a value added solution, and that could be product or service at a profit. That's it,
mm,
right? And yet you talk to people about what marketing is, it's tactics, it's lead generation, it's branding, it's all this stuff. So in my way of thinking, there's kind of some basic steps that you need to do. I guess first step is you need to recognize, this is going to sound silly, but you need to recognize the customer is important. It's
mm.
not something you do to, it's something you understand and satisfy their needs, wants, desires with service, with product. So some of the things I see, and you can correct me or change direction anytime you want here, but if I go to B2B, um, and SaaS especially, there's no segmentation. There's no
Mm.
customer segmentation. There's no ideal customer profile. I've had discussions with some of these people at networking events, and I go, well, who's your customer segment? Everyone. And there are very few products that are sold like slices of bread. And even bread, you've got a gluten free segment. So they're not doing that. First thing is, why segment? Okay. And
Right.
there's a few reasons. One is you are better off profitability wise and market share wise concentrating on one or two or three segments. It's better to be 20% share in one segment than be 1% share in 20 different segments.
Right.
All right. Second is, in order to dominate, the magazines, the social media, the trade shows, all this stuff, if you just market to everyone general, you're not going to be known for anything, right? So what I suggest is you start by your good segments, and the methodology behind that is, first of all, you talk to your good customers and find out what they have in common. Unfortunately, to a lot of marketers, segmentation has become, what's the demographics, what's
Mm,
what's the zip code, how big is the company. And the reality is, I have found and it depends on industry, but a lot of segmentation is either based on the application, how they're using your product, or the reaction to risk. Do they want to be a risk taker? Do they not want to be a risk taker? And
Mm.
so in order to get this, you actually have to have discussions. You just can't send out surveys or do nothing. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, it does. So you know, common practices of segmentation, which is just just looking at LinkedIn kind of drop downs, basically.
Yeah.
How big's the company? How big's the headcount? So you're saying that we should really be looking at risk appetite, like maybe let's look at where your product or service stands in terms of its development, in terms of the kind of product or service it is, the kind of company you are, you new, in which case it's higher risk to hire you versus if you're established. And then based on that, see, based on that, what?
Well, what you do is you take these good customers and you look and understand why they're good, right?
Okay.
I'll give you an example because it's kind of hard to talk theoretically sometimes. There's a company that makes stainless steel pumps, and
Mm.
it's stainless steel because certain chemicals can corrode the pump. So if it's a normal production facility, sometimes a pump is a pump, and whoever comes in and services well at a reasonable cost. But there are exceptions. If you sell to the pharmaceutical industry, your pump is on a line, or sometimes they call it a skid, that puts all these chemicals in. And the important thing to realize there is the FDA comes out and certifies that equipment line and that pump. So if
Mm.
you want to change that pump, first of all, you got to take the line down, which is, millions of dollars at risk. Second, you'd have to test a new brand, and then you'd have to have the FDA come in and recertify it. So the bottom, and we had a pump client. So the bottom line is, for an existing pharmaceutical line, you are never going to get in as a new vendor. They've standardized on you, the
Mm.
FDA. But if you look at new lines or new drugs coming out, you have a chance there because they have to certify that whole thing. So it's really trying to understand why some customers buy you, why they prefer you, why in some cases they standardize on you. Is your product viewed as a commodity or a technical product? And so I'm making some of this kind of easy when I say risk and application,
Mm.
but it is painful. It is painful trying to understand why your best customers are your best customers.
Can we do a whole episode where we just deep dive into this? I think right now we've just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
highlighted why it's important and what it is. Then we can do a whole episode. We dive into this and maybe at the end of it have some frameworks that people can follow up with. That would be amazing. Um, okay, so part one is segmentation. I think, as I said, we've established why it's different to what people think it is and why it's worth it. And then you were talking, you're talking about other aspects,
Yeah.
including.
So what I've but so in order to grow, you need customer acquisition and you need customer retention. And if you look at where everyone is concentrating today, it's on customer acquisition. How do we scale? How do we get more customers? How do we make the investor happy? And it's important, but it's also important to realize that retaining customers drives profitability. New customers are more expensive to get. Some people estimate 5 to 7 times. So if you can prevent a customer from defecting, and then you
Mm.
add on top of that the issue of the 80-20 rule. 20% of your accounts are 80% of your volume. And you should not be treating everyone the same. You should be giving
Mm.
those people extra love, attention, whatever they want. And the objective is to, first of all, make sure that you retain those people, But second, what Ken Blanchard calls make them a raving fan, and
Mm.
that where they love you. And what are examples of raving fans? Apple, Tesla, Harley Davidson. People go to Apple. They stand in line for hours to get the newest iPhone. That is extreme loyalty, and not all companies have that.
Could you give me an example of what that kind of like, raving fan looks like in your experience in like a normal context? What kind of pump company expect
Well,
about raving fans?
I think raving fan. So it's a complicated thing. So first of all, obviously the solution is good, sometimes spectacular. There's a computer company. I'm not going to name them on tape here, but they make blue computers, and their product per se is okay, but not great. What sets them apart is service. If you're in a
Mm,
financial institution and your mainframe goes out, they're either on site or will be on site within an hour or two. All right, that's what
right.
sets them apart. So it's really understanding the product, how they use the product, and that's a lot of user research. How the product is bought, and how you evaluate vendors, and how you service the account. And service the account is it's more than customer service. It's how do they want to be served. Um, what I found is that in B2B markets, where companies fall down the most, it's kind of the front end and the back end. The front end, they spend all their time on acquiring new customers. Once they have them, they forget about them and they're going back to more new customers. And so if you call post transaction for customer service or technical support, you're on the phone, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And that's not a way to treat customers. Also, it's not a way to force them to use a low cost bot or and so you have to think this whole thing through between how they become aware of your product, how they prefer it, how they buy it, and how they want to be served after they purchase it. And companies
Mm.
tend to stop, oh, they bought our product, we don't have to worry about them anymore.
Can I ask you something that might seem like a bit of a naughty question, but what has what you've just said got to do with marketing? I know what's got to do with marketing, but I think some people listening will go, you're talking about the buyer journey before, middle, after. Why
So
is that relevant for marketers?
marketing, I believe, is a holistic system. I call it a marketing delivery system. So it's the
Mm,
product, it's your service, it's your rep, it's your technical support, it's
mm,
your uh, how helpful people are when they call. Are you easy to do business with? Are you difficult? And all that
yeah,
is marketing. And what frankly just I laugh a lot of times. You mentioned LinkedIn before. Someone will
mm,
say marketing is just lead qualification, or
mm,
marketing is just advertising. And
mm,
it's like a tree with many limbs, and they're picking one or two limbs off and saying this is marketing. And the worst I've seen in this is they'll say, well, marketing's for lead generation. Why not just have marketing report to sales? I've heard that.
yeah.
Um, so it's a broader definition of just selling more product. It's really managing the relationship that you have with these customers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk a bit more about that. I think that that is a common thought and links a little bit more to what I said at the beginning, where people are coming into marketing from sales. This mindset of marketing now, as you mentioned, is acquisition. So when you think about it like that, it is quite narrow and it is quite just related directly to getting your product in front of somebody and then triggering them to buy. You're giving a more holistic picture of
Mm-hmm.
what this is. And I think maybe in another episode, we should also talk about like what a marketing team looks like. Like, how does that really play out in terms of roles, that'd be really interesting. Like
Well,
this
let me
topic.
just
Yeah.
let me okay. So one of the biggest problems is there are still silos between marketing and sales.
Mm,
I mean, unless your company's very very small, where one person's doing everything, sales does their thing, marketing does their thing, and everyone talks about leveling the silos and working together, which is right.
mm,
But working together should be centered around the customer as your North Star, not because I've heard stuff. It's like, well, why don't you just ask the salespeople what they want? And that's part of it. But why not ask the customer what they want, how to be served, how many times the rep should call on them,
mm,
what products do they want, and marketing and sales and engineering and all these groups work together to fulfill that
mm,
customer, especially if you're a key account, one of those 80/20
mm,
accounts.
mm. I think I think the thing that people are scared of is that if they ask the customer all these questions, they'll just get irritated by the company.
Okay, so let me tell you how they're asked now, and let me tell you how they should be asked. So now, unfortunately, a lot of the fintech SaaS people, they don't do any research at all. They just jump, like what you're saying earlier, into tactics. Sometimes they'll have their reps ask a few questions, which they're not trained to be consultative. They're trained to sell. Other times they ask for they send out surveys, closed-ended surveys. Let's just get 500 closed-ended surveys. And
What's
surveys are,
closing?
yeah, closed-ended surveys are good to validate hypothesis. They are terrible for generating insight. Now, let me circle back to the first part of your question. You're making an assumption that the customers will be upset. In
Mm,
reality, I've literally done over 250 projects. What I find, and a lot of times we're talking to their major customers, they are happy someone wants their opinion because that's never been
mm,
asked before, and they are delighted to help you because if they help you as a vendor, they're helping themselves. So if you discover that and I'm making all this up here, but if you discover your delivery is only 80%, and it's not consistent what day of the week it comes in on the trucks, and you fix that, you fix one of their problems. So they want to see you, they want their input, and they want their input to be acted on. Now I will say one thing. If you
mm.
continually get their input and you continually don't act on it, they will get, I was going to use another word, but they will get upset.
Yeah.
They will get very upset. So you have to make a commitment. We are here to improve. We're going to listen to what the customer thinks, and we're going to execute on that. And if you don't have that top level commitment from the C suite or the founder or the CEO or whatever, it's just a bunch of data that's not going to be acted
Mm,
on. Now, I don't know if I
mm.
answered your question or not.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things are, I can see that they open the door to a deeper conversation. So I think right now, what I'd like to ask is if you'd be happy to do an episode as well, looking at the different kinds of surveys, you know, and what good questions are, and then how do we pick out from these surveys the things that we want to act on,
Well,
sort the noise from
and
the
I'd be delighted to
insight.
do that. I can give you some generalities here.
Okay.
Um, Everyone wants to race to closed-ended surveys, right? Where you just get a number and you tab the number, or rating or ranking or whatever.
Mm,
The gold comes in open-ended questions,
okay.
and say like, and I'll just give you a few examples here. How can we improve? What would you like us to do to help meet your objectives?
Mm,
Give me some areas where we're not matching the competition. And so there's a battery of questions you ask, and what you're listening for is the customer to say, here's where I really want your help. And the problem with these closed-ended surveys, besides not getting a lot of whys, is you are assuming your questions are correct. And
Mm,
more than not, when we've done research and we've started asking management, opinion on some of the questions, there's a disconnect, or there are issues that management has not um, thought important that the customer thinks is vital.
mm. You know, you're making me. So when you talk about closed-ended surveys, think I've experienced them in the form of when you sign up to a webinar and they ask you a drop-down list of questions. Is that the kind of thing that you're
Yeah, I mean
talking about?
that's a subset of it. I mean, it's normally
Okay.
what we see is they send out requests for email. You click on a link and you go to some website and you fill these things out, and then it's tabulated and you use something. It could be AI or it could be SurveyMonkey or whatever, and you get nice
Wow.
pie charts. But what you
Mm,
don't get is
mm.
why,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what do we need to work on? I mean, well, I'll let you lead this here.
100%. Like some of these questions, I'm playing devil's advocate, and now I just feel a bit tempted to add in my own 2 cents. Like I've seen NPS score surveys being done, and then they come up with a score, but they never ask the qualitative question, "Why did you give this score?"
So,
And
so,
so you have
so
no idea. Mm.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to bring NPS because that actually could be a separate
Let's keep it up.
discussion here. And I
Sorry.
actually I wrote an article on NPS for Quirks, but here's the problem with NPS. And I've read all of Reichheld's books. I think he's a genius. All right. Right
Okay.
now, if you go out, most of the marketers are giving thumbs down to NPS, right? But how are they using it? They're using it after each transaction. They're not getting the whys. And they've become really like vanity metrics for the CEO. We
Mm,
have a 50% NPS. And then I'll get a subsequent question. Okay, what are you going to do? Well, we don't know. We didn't, like your point. We didn't ask them why. But
mm,
if you have the process in place where you find the scores, you understand the drivers under your control, you execute that, you survey, let's say 18 months later, you become a learning organization. It's almost like the quality Six Sigma people. You get better and better and better at
mm.
serving their needs. So I didn't mean to jump off on that. It's just and the MPS. It's, to me, it's like a carpenter using the wooden end of a hammer to pound in sheet metal screws, and then blaming the product because it's not working. And we just don't seem to want to. We don't want to work. We don't want to think about it. We just want to send
Mm.
surveys out because it's easy. And so this is another symptom of where data is used, but insights are not surrounding the data.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's also a symptom of like just the age that we live in. The kind of data that we like is something numerical that we can quickly get some sort of an answer from. The kind of data that you're talking about, this kind of um, more
Strategic.
wordy data, yeah, it's kind of somebody's thoughts and feelings, and it's harder to sift. It's not like 50%. Give me a number for it,
Well,
type of
and
thing.
and and I think there's a difference here, Shatan, between B2B and B2C. So
Mm,
B2B, as I said, you have an 80-20 rule. If you have 100 accounts, you've got 20 that does 80% of your sales. You concentrate on those 20. Understand. So I would say in B2B, you start with open-ended discussions. You can have some numbers in there, but a lot of it is, how do we improve? What do you want? All that stuff. And then if you need to, you use the surveys to validate or go to other segments. In
mm,
B2C, you have millions of people buying bleach or toothpaste. You can't
mm,
really do that. So it's
mm,
almost reverse. It's like, okay, do your statistical uh, sampling, do your surveys, and then when you do your crosstabs, look for opportunities or threats, and then take an overview of, okay, now we need to do a qualitative understanding. We need to have focus groups or ethnography where you hang out with the user. Um, But the whole point of this. So two kind of parts of this. Bain and Company said only 21% of B2B companies identify and act on insights. Um, and I actually think they sampled too high because it takes a lot of money to afford a high level consulting firm. But for second, so let's say 1 in 5 do. That means 4 out of 5 don't. And they also came up with this thing that every 5% increase in retention of your customers drives 25 to 95% more profit.
Mm.
And yet people are still going out and trying to hook up all these. It's like throwing fishing nets out and hooking up new customers to come in. So I guess
Mm.
the whole point of this is we have gotten into a rut where we do things the same way. We think we know what our customers want, and we don't.
Mm.
Um, and it's even worse. I'll go into SaaS. We're product led, we're sales led. Where's the customer in this whole thing? Have you talked to the customer?
Yeah, I think I'd like to dive into that a bit because SaaS is such a huge industry, it's massive influence.
There's value as long as the customer is in there, but the customer should be your North Star. You should be.
Okay.
I call it customer obsessed. Customers are. They're the most important thing, especially your key accounts. And then under that, and this is we can differ here, but under that, to me, it's just tactics. Do you spend more time
Mhm.
on social media? Do you design a website with better SEO? Do you do more advertising? Do you do more branding? But if you don't, it, um, one of my favorite books when I was a kid is Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, any door will do,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
and so you've always got to put the customer on top. And I've worked with some website firms, and they normally don't even have the customer in the process. They don't understand how the customers use it, how they navigate it, how they search for stuff, how do they look for pricing, and it's all internally generated, and we are becoming totally oblivious to customer needs and wants in the marketplace. We're back to, well, we think we can build a better mousetrap. People are going to knock on our door, and I'll talk to a B2B um, uh, new founder or fintech founder. It's like, okay, what segment are you targeting? Well, as you said earlier, I want to sell to everyone. Okay, so that's a problem. And that's like, well, why should someone buy your solution? And what you expect to hear are benefits from the user. What you hear is the technology is neat, people know me, or they kind of
Mm.
list all these features. And there's a disconnect between the original statement I made on Kotler, find out what the customer wants and then serve them, versus, okay, we're just going to keep doing this. And to me, it's like throwing a bunch of darts at a dartboard. Okay, first product launch was not successful. Let's have another. Let's have another. Versus understanding what they really want. And in the end, you're more successful if you have the customer drive the process. You're more efficient because you're not redoing everything. And you know what tactics are important. If, and I'm making this up, but if they don't use a website, why design a fancy website, right? And so
Mhm.
it's just strange. The whole thing is just, we've gotten off track in the last 15 to 20 years, and frankly, I don't see a way back to this. I'll have a suggestion here.
Mm.
Um, no matter what size firm you are in, go talk to some customers. It should be a minimum of 10. Go to their site, talk to them, see how they use the product, see what they want, see the perceptions of your brand in the competition. Um, and you will be much smarter. You will just be much smarter than the competition who doesn't want to do that.
Perfect. I kind of surfacing, right? Like what we're doing here is to give people that toolkit, that mental toolkit, so they can actually look at a situation, and start to make decisions flexibly and appropriately to what they're seeing, rather than rely on a playbook or rely on kind of some sort of a trend that's kind of happening right now. Everyone's doing video on LinkedIn. Let's do video on LinkedIn. It's like, well, do you really want to invest in that? Let's think about this. And one of the key aspects is this idea of putting the customer as a North Star. And I also wonder how, maybe, when you say customers as a North Star, you kind of mentioned more than,
So in
just the
each
insights.
in each customer, there are a series of stakeholders, right? There's the user, and you've got to understand how they use your product, and there are people that buy it. They're economic decision makers. There's people that specify it. So what I've been proposing to companies now, clients, is first identify your customers from high to low. Who are your 80/20 accounts? Put who are the stakeholders in each account, and then do what I'll call a 10/30/90. Every
Mm,
10% of a marketer's time should be in front of a customer, not playing on the
mhm,
computer, not doing social content. Every 30 days, engineering should be in front of a customer. What products do you want? And once a quarter, someone in the C suite needs to call on, be assigned to a key account, and go talk to them. What do you want? How can we help? And you look in the past, when IBM kind of went astray for a while, Gerstner came in as a CEO. What's the first thing he did? He visited his major customers. What are we doing right? Where are we screwing up? What do you want us to do? That's all he
mhm.
asked through those three questions. So the answer is not within your organization. The answer is in the market, and you start with customers and various stakeholders within those customers.
Okay.
That's the
Okay. And
gospel according to Alan, right?
yeah, we began by talking about well, you referenced some other guys who are doing it too. So I guess it's a bit of a pattern that you're drawing on as well.
It's a I think the biggest hurdle, it's a paradigm. And there's
Mm,
nothing to get these people to break the paradigm unless the board of directors demands it, or unless the investors demand it. But the investors are more interested in scaling, right? So than any of this stuff. So I struggle with how's this going to change, and there's about a dozen of my compatriots in different companies, and we're all trying to do the same thing, but it's a heavy lift. It is a heavy lift to change the direction of the industry.
to become more customer focused and understand strategically how do you actually think about marketing. I don't think we really touched on it, but I think it's worth I'm asking you because,
Mhm.
like, why exactly do you think that we are here? What is this exactly? This bad situation that we're in beyond lack of customer focus? Because I think if we can articulate that, then it might,
Well,
if somebody is listening.
yeah, I've labeled this whole thing marketing malpractice. My wife's a big viewer of Grey's Anatomy, and one episode they were being sued for some medical malpractice on TV, and I thought that's it. That's my alliteration: marketing malpractice. And we're not putting the customer first. And if we want to cover ourselves, we get some scores. We get some NPS scores, or we get some
Mm,
performance scores, or again, we have the reps ask a few questions. And asking a few questions is not the same as having an open-ended dialogue. Uh,
mm,
so one is, I'm trying to sell you the next product or solution, versus I'm trying to understand you. How can we help you
mm.
achieve your objectives? And they're totally different things. And I'm trying not to be pessimistic here, but we've been doing this for about 15 or 20 years, and I see more and more, and the sad part is with AI, now we're going to have more idiotic surveys done cheaper, and we're going to stray away even more from insight. So I don't know. I don't know. I won't be living long enough to see this industry turn around. I don't think, but
Well, I hope so, Alan, because I'm going to be living through it. I do see hope. Maybe it's just my optimism, but not having seen as much as you've seen, maybe it's that. I do see this kind of bouncing back. I'm having this conversation with you, right, for a reason. And I think things like AI is going to accelerate the malpractice to the point at which it becomes so ineffective that there's just going to be a force of this bounce back. It just makes you think of McDonald's, right? Like we all grew up not thinking that McDonald's was necessarily bad for you. There was a point in history, I think in the 70s, when they didn't think smoking was bad for you. And everyone just started doing it more and more and more and more until cancer came in. And then
yeah, that'll do
there's
it.
a bounce back,
That'll, that'll,
you know.
the cancerous lung on the packages of cigarettes. That was well, and maybe it's a middle ground. Maybe there is some bounce
Yeah.
back. I still see a lot of people going the old ways, and another driver of this, I think, in larger B2B companies, you have a vice president, usually of sales and marketing combined,
Mm,
and 80% of the time, could be more, could be a little bit less, they come up through the sales side. They haven't been trained
mm,
in marketing. Um, they have their ad agency do analytics. They'll have their ad agency do websites. Um, and it's not their fault. They haven't been trained. And so,
mm,
how they got to that seat at the table is they perform very well in sales. And when the company has a down period, they
mm,
kind of go back to the arrows in their quiver, which is sales. Get more leads, get more people in the pipeline. We got to close this by the end of the year. And the marketing is kind of like assumed to be static. Um,
mm,
and I've had this conversation with a lot of service providers, and they kind of see the same thing. It's truly phenomenal when someone understands that marketing is important, branding is important, and
mm.
not just sales, not just product led. And I go back as I very much believe it is a holistic system. I think it goes back to you have to become a learning organization. You just can't stay
Mhm.
still. And how you move, how you align all the silos, how you get sales and marketing working together, how you get marketing and engineering working together as you use the customer. And Fred Reichhold, the inventor of Net Promoter Score, his
Mhm.
last book really nailed this. He talked about the problem with not getting of just using scores. He talked about using this to align everyone around the customer. So
Mhm.
so in the end, you have customers and employees that are aligned on what's important.
What's interesting about this is kind of occurring to me is that we when I think about marketing, yeah, I do think about the big brand stuff, creativity, call it demand gen, if you will, and then lead gen. These two kinds of activities operating side by side. But what we spoke about mostly in this is how marketing in an organization, and let me know if I got this right, is the center, is the place which connects with the customer. And then from there, and maybe intermittently you have engineering and you have sales also, but really that's the place where customer insights are collected, understood, and then redistributed into product, service, customer success, sales, and then as an extension also, yes, producing material for the different
Yeah,
tactical
I
elements.
think you're right conceptually. Frankly, if I had concentric circles, the most innermost circle would be the customer. And then
Mm-hmm.
marketing around the customer to translate those insights, as you said, to other
Mm-hmm.
departments. Um, customer service, supporting it, inside sales, engineering. Um, and I am tired of seeing products that fail on the market because engineering was given a free rein, and so they've made their product too complex, too
Mm,
overpriced. But again, I think 80% of the ills of this current marketing malpractice would solve themselves if you started with the customer and then you work backward into your organization. And then, so I'm not saying lead gen is not important. I'm not saying branding
mm,
is not important, but branding to what? You know what it aligns with your customer's perception of your brand now and where you want to take it versus the competition.
mm,
So I hate to sound like a broken record, but when in doubt, start with the customer. And it should be an ongoing process. It shouldn't just be, well, we have a new product, so it should be a dialogue. And then once the customer sees you improving, go back to your first part when you started this, they say, this is
mm.
great. They've improved. I'd be delighted to help you going forward. Um, and I do believe marketing has a role, like you said, understand the insights, bring those insights in the organization, have the organization execute initiatives on that, and find out how you're progressing according to the customer. Because some salespeople that are more strategic and consultative, but unfortunately, a lot of them are um, hunters. You grab them, you sell them. Who's next in the funnel? Where do I go? And so, unless you're going to spend the time training them, which I still don't think many of them
Mm.
can be trained, your default is marketing. Your default is marketing.
It is. It is. I think it sets the scene for the next conversations really, really well. And I am going to also pull all of your reading recommendations from this. There's about 5, 6 killer books in there, so I'm going to pull them and also
And
put them
and
in
if
the description.
nothing else, it's a plea that you can ignore. Read Kotler on marketing. Read a book by Kotler. It's not all lead. It's and he's brilliant. There's a lot of brilliant people, Michael Porter, but start with Kotler. You know.
Mm, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, we'll put that then. I know there's a few papers as well that he wrote, like scientific journals, which are really interesting marketing journals to read. So I'll drop them in the description too. Let's go. You see, the tide's changing. The tide's changing already.
I don't call one speckle of water a changing tide, but sure. I'll take
Yeah.
anyone that wants to go on my rowboat and row towards the customer. Anyone is welcome.
Yeah, nice, nice, nice. Well, I've definitely jumped on. Thanks, Alan. I don't know if you've got any concluding thoughts, but otherwise,
No, I just there's an old ad campaign, and I can't even remember who did it. It said "Think different." It's time to think
mm,
different. It's not
yeah,
executing the same old tired
that's Apple.
playbook with the same old tired results. And as my grandfather used to say, if you're getting a headache from hitting your head on the wall, stop hitting your head on the wall. Do something different. You still might get a headache, but it's something different.
Yeah,
And so I just think that's where we are. But I enjoyed chatting with you.
100%.
Good luck editing all this.
Yeah, well, I'll take the luck and I'll run with it. Once again, thanks, Alan. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.